Hello learners, welcome back to this online study session on the Scarllet Letter. In the previous part, we had discussed and analyzed in depth the characters of the Puritans, Pearl and Hester in the Scarlett Letter. In this video, we will be talking about the characters of Chillingworth and Dimmesdale. Like the previous video, over here also we would see that how each character is important in understanding the worth, is important in understanding the multifaceted layers of other characters. Even though these characters may seem to be living different lives, we don't see much interaction between Pearl and Dimmesdale, or Hester and Dimmesdale, or Hester and Chillingworth. Despite that, despite living different lives, all these major characters are intertwined in a way that they not only help develop the plot, but they also develop each other's character and the lives that they are living. So without further ado, let us begin with the character analysis of Chillingworth. Many critics over the years have been fascinated by the psychology of Roger Chillingworth, but structurally he is a character of the same type as Pearl, chiefly symbolic and allegorical. As Mistress Hibbins and Governor Bellingham are identified as parts of a whole by being made to live together in the same house as Pearl lives with Hester, so Chillingworth lives with Dimmesdale and can be thought of as a part of him. Just as Hester can be better understood by analyzing Pearl, Dimmesdale can be better understood by analyzing Chillingworth. Pearl and Chillingworth both, from different perspectives, stand for the broken law, and the differences between Dimmesdale and Hester can be seen most intensely in a contrast to their constant companions. To be sure, some space is devoted to the idea of a deterioration and change in Chillingworth, as though he were a realistic character. But the change is always described in highly fanciful language, although some of that language comes from the superstitious multitude. Their explanations are replicated in the narrator's metaphors. Thus, according to the vulgar idea, the fire in his laboratory had been brought from the lower regions and was fed with infernal fuel, and so, as might be expected, his visage was getting sooty with the smoke. This medieval representation of Chillingworth's alteration is validated only 2 pages later by the narrator, who says, in language equally fanciful, that sometimes a light glimmered out of the physician's eyes, burning blue and ominous, like the reflection of a furnace, or one of those gleams of ghastly fire that darted from Bunyan's awful door way in the hillside. The only way that we can allow that there really was a blue light burning out of Chillingworth's eyes is to allow him a non-realistic level of existence in the story. In a later chapter, Hester looks at Chillingworth and observes from the changed appearance that he has become a friend. The narrator corroborates her reading. Old Roger Chillingworth was a striking evidence of man's faculty of transforming himself into a devil. If he will only for a reasonable space of time undertake a devil's office, this unhappy person had effected such a transformation by devoting himself for 7 years to the constant analysis of a heart full of torture and deriving his enjoyment hence, and adding fuel to those fiery tortures which he analyzed and gloated over. In a later chapter, Hester looks at Chillingworth and observes from his changed appearance that he has become a different person. Materializing out of the forest, realistically explained as Hester's husband, Chillingworth quickly loses his human identity and, attaching himself to the minister, begins his mission like Pearl's, that of a messenger of anguish. He becomes the extremist representation possible of a pitiless conscience, and well suggests the idea that no judge is so exacting as the judge within. All that guilty sorrow hidden from the world, whose great heart would have pitied and forgiven, to be revealed to him, the pitiless, to him, the unforgiving. If Pearl is not yet human, Chillingworth is no longer human. And after Dimmesdale's death, and almost vanished from the mortal sight like an uprooted weed that lies wilting in the sun. Also, along with his role as Dimmesdale's alter ego, Chillingworth has a story of his own. Those who have read Hawthorne's better-known short works will recall how often he wrote allegories about people with obsessions, people who become their own victims. Quite often, these obsessed people start out as particularly rational, even scientific individuals. They are overtaken by their goal, they lose touch with humanity, they become monsters, and they often end up as destroyers of those they love. In fact, as Hawthorne's stories tend to represent it, those who are obsessed have become incapable of love. Perhaps their original weakness is a dearth of self-consciousness and human connection in the first place. At some level, all obsession is self-obsession. Hence, egoism and obsession are same. Some examples of such stories are Ethan Brand, The Birthmark, The Great Carbuncle, The Man of Adamant. Certainly, Hawthorne locates Chillingworth's susceptibility to obsession in his original lack of warmth. This lack of warmth is both the cause of and is augmented by his occupation as a scientist and a scholar. The scientist has a mentality prone to dispassionate experimentation, but after banishing his passions, he finds them returning as obsessions. The scholar tends to substitute books for life, perhaps because his capacity for life is weak. Interestingly, in view of the fact that Hawthorne was himself a writer of books and an avid reader, not one reference to books and learning in the Scarlett Letter is favorable. The Bible, as noted earlier, is virtually unmentioned, and the book most often referred to is its antithesis, the book carried under the devil's arm, wherein he writes the names of those who join his satanic society. Otherwise, a life among books is seen as cause or result of a lack of capacity for fellowship. Reverend Wilson looks like a frontispiece in a volume of sermons and has no more right than one of those portraits would have to step forth as he now did and meddle with a question of human guilt, passion, and anguish. Chillingworth explains his inadequacies as Hester's husband by calling himself the bookworm of great libraries. Though one person can be both scientist and scholar, there is a difference between them. The scholar tends to be conservative and traditional. The scientist is more radical in thought and temperament. The scholar looks backward, the scientist forward. But neither of them relates to the moment like Pearl. They lack reference and adaptation to the world in which they were born. Thus, if we know Hawthorne's previous writings, we are not surprised that he embodies his figure of obsessive vengeance in a scientist and a scholar. Nor that Chillingworth's investigation, undertaken with the severe and equal integrity of a judge, the serious only truth, quickly gives way to a terrible fascination, a kind of fierce, though still calm, necessity which seizes him and never sets him free again. New to Hawthorne's treatment of this type in the Scarlet Letter is his developing the character in connection with the broken law, thereby making him a metaphoric judge, a law enforcer. Now we will analyze Hester's character. In Hester Prynne, Hawthorne created the first true heroine of American fiction, as well as one of its enduring heroes. Hester is a heroine because she is deeply implicated in and responsive to the gender structure of her society, and because her story, turning on love, is appropriate for a woman. She is a hero because she has qualities and actions that transcend this gender reference and lead to heroism as it can be understood for anyone. Such helpfulness was found in her, so much power to do and power to sympathize, that many people refuse to interpret the Scarlet A by its original significance. They said that it meant with a woman's strength. Neither can I any longer live without her companionship. So powerful is she to sustain, so tender to soothe. The power is remarkable in that its existence seems so improbable in an outcast woman. If the Puritan state draws its power from the consensual community and the laws that uphold it, then clearly Hester has access to a completely different source of power, or is perhaps herself an alternative source of power. And it is a power that even the Puritan world cannot deny, for with her native energy of character and rare capacity, it could not entirely cast her off. Perhaps, however, it is precisely her essential alienation from the community that explains this power. Although Hester can hardly doubt the power of the Puritan community to punish her and define the circumstances of her life, she knows, as we do, that they have this power only because she has granted it to them. She is free to leave Boston whenever she chooses. Her decision to stay entails a submission to Puritan power, but since she can withdraw her consent at any time, this submission is always provisional. Her reasons for staying may be misguided, but they are her own. In schematic terms, if the Puritans symbolize the law, then Hester symbolizes the individual person with this important provision. She also symbolizes good. It would be easy to deduce from this polarity that Hawthorne wants us to think that law is bad and the individual good, but that would be too easy. Matters in Hawthorne are never so clear-cut, but he certainly gives us a situation wherein two kinds of power confront each other in conflict, and strongly suggests that any society that regards the power of the individual only as an adversary to be overcome is profoundly defective and deeply inhuman. Hester's situation, even before the commission of her sin, is that of an outsider. She was sent to Massachusetts in advance of her husband. He had decided to emigrate, not she. The native strength of her character is certainly abated by the fact that as a young woman in a society dominated by aging men, she has no public importance. Even when she becomes a public figure through her punishment, her psyche is largely left alone. The magistrates condemn her to wear the letter, but thereafter seem to have only a very superficial interest in her. A minister who sees her on the street may take the opportunity to preach an extempore sermon. People stare at the letter, children jeer, but none of this behavior represents an attempt to change Hester's mind. It is hoped that the external letter will work its way down into Hester's heart and cause repentance, but nobody really cares, and this indifference is Hester's freedom. In fact, the effect the letter, so far as Hester's character is concerned, is to the opposite of what was intended. Turning her into a public symbol, it conceals her individuality and thus protects it. As the representative of individuality, rather than subjecting herself to the law, subjects it to her own scrutiny. As I have said, she takes herself as a law. She is not by nature rebellious, and during the 7-year period of the Scarlet Letter's action, she certainly attempts to accept the judgment implicit in the letter. But ultimately, she is unable to transcend her heartfelt conviction that she has not sinned. She loves Dimmesdale, with whom she sinned. She loves the child that her sin brought forth. How then can she agree that her deed was wrong? She goes so far in her thinking as to attribute her own law to God, thus denying the entire rationale of the Puritan community, their certainty that their laws conform to divine intention. Man had marked this woman's sin by a scarlet letter, which had such potent and disastrous efficacy that no human sympathy could reach her, save it were sinful like herself. God, as a direct consequence of the sin which man thus punished, had given her a lovely child, whose place was on that same dishonored bosom, to connect her parent forever with the race and descent of mortals, and to be finally a blessed soul in heaven. In fact, while the outward Hester performs deeds of mercy and kindness throughout the 7 years, the inward Hester grows ever more alienated and over time becomes what she was not at first, a genuine revolutionary and social radical. Had she spoken her thoughts, she probably would have suffered death from the stern tribunals of the period for attempting to undermine the foundations of the Puritan establishment. If it were not for the existence of Pearl, for whose sake she lives quietly in Boston, she would have become, like Anne Hutchinson, a religious reformer. But just as Hester refuses to take the road to witchcraft on account of Pearl, she rejects Hutchinson's radical part for the same reason. She feels particular obligation to human beings far more than she feels general social responsibilities. She behaves as a sister of mercy in the community because this is the way to live unmolested, not because she believes in doing good. And she wants to live unmolested so that she can bring up Pearl, staying in Boston on account of Dimmesdale and living there as she does on account of Pearl. Hester's behavior is appropriate to her role as representative of individual personal. No doubt this makes the whole issue of social reform on behalf of individualism highly problematic. So far as Hester is concerned, and this is our concern at present, the very consistency of her individualism keeps her within the sphere of the personal. Among Hester's key defining traits, we cannot overlook her skill at her needle. If her nature includes the characters of outcast, rebel, lover, mother, and sister of mercy, it also includes the character of artist. Her gift for needlework is the expression of an artist's nature. The embroideries that she produces are genuine works of art. We meet her skill first, of course, in the letter, which, surrounded with an elaborate embroidery and fantastic flourishes of gold thread, is so artistically done and with so much fertility and gorgeous luxuriousness of fancy that it had all the effect of a last and fitting decoration to her splendid apparel. Hester's grand costuming for the scaffold scene, far more elegant than what the dress code of the colony normally would allow her, is not seen again. She wears nothing but drab grey gowns. Her dreary dress, however, becomes a frame for the letter, and the letter remains as it is clearly meant to be, an ornament. Beautifying the letter through art is another way in which Hester breaks the Puritan law, although the Puritan rulers, unlike the women in the crowd, are too literal-minded to notice it. The letter becomes the chief ground for the struggle between Hester and the Puritans and is able to play this role because of Hester's gift as an artist. It is tempting here to associate artistic skill with social rebellion, but the equation does not hold. For Hester supports herself in Puritan Boston chiefly by making the elaborate decorative garments that the magistrates wear for public occasions and that are allowed to the better off in the colony. Deep ruffs, painfully wrought bands, and gorgeously embroidered gloves were all deemed necessary to the official state of men assuming the reins of power and were readily allowed to individuals dignified by rank or wealth. Art does not have an inherently political nature, although, as the instance of the letter shows, it can become highly politicized. Rather, it is the expression of an original and creative energy of fertility, of imagination, and of the love for the beautiful, even the gorgeous. This energy and creativity have no reference to society at all. Artists and their products can be appropriated by society or condemned by it. But society cannot make art, only individuals can. Indeed, only individuals who retain or contain a profound non-social element in their makeup, as Hester does, can make art. Although the social structure of the age denies virtually all forms of artistic expression to women, it does allow this one, and Hester makes use of it as an outlet for this side of her nature. For its part, society makes use of her. The Puritans may be incapable of producing art, but they certainly want to possess it. Therefore, despite everything, they want Hester in their community. They want her as she is, but this is something they have to learn about themselves. And if they do not learn in time, there will be a society with no more Hesters. Thank you.